So now we need to talk about multiplying polynomials. Remember what a polynomial looks like. It's going to be a group of terms, and we need to multiply them together. When we are multiplying, we multiply the numbers, and then we also multiply the variables separately. So let's look at one term times one term. So as I just said, we're going to multiply our numbers, and then we will multiply our variables together. So we would end up with 2 times 5 and xy times x. 2 times 5 is 10. That part's easy. And I'm sorry, this is an x, it's a y. When we multiply our variables together, remember that means we add the exponents. We would have x and then y to the 1 plus 1, which means we'll have 10xy squared. Going into another example, we would do 4 times 5, and then we would do x squared times x to the first. 4 times 5 is going to give me 20, and x squared times x is going to be x to the 2 plus 1, which gives us x to the third. So we'll have 20x to the third. Now let's talk about 1 times 2. Now in this case, we have 2 terms times 1 term. So now we need to take this whole first term and multiply it, distribute it in. So we would have 3y times x squared minus 3y times x. We could have also written this as 3y x squared plus 3y times negative x. So either two ways will work. I think I'm actually going to go with this way over here because we kept our negative with our x, and that's the way we typically like to do things. So we would have 3 times 1, and 3 times 1 is going to give me 3. My x and my y cannot combine, so we would just have 3x squared y. Everything just kind of gets mushed together. On the next one, we would have 3y times negative x. Again, this is in front of x, there's a 1. So now we have 3 times negative 1, which would give me negative 3xy, because again, we just take our variables and smush them together since we cannot put them together. So that would be the answer for that one. Let's do another example. So again, we need to distribute that 3x to each part, meaning we would have 3x squared times 3x. And like I said, let's try and keep our negative or our minus with our numbers. So we'll put a plus here and then go 9, negative 9 times 3x. So we need to put our constants together. So we would have 3 times 3. And then we would have x squared times x. 3 times 3 is going to give me 9, and x squared times x is going to be x to the 2 plus 1, which gives us 9x squared. Over here, we would have negative 9 times 3, and then we would also have our x. Negative 9 times 3 gives me negative 27x. And that would be the answer. 2 terms times 2 terms, a binomial times a binomial. This is when we FOIL, we first, outer, inner, last, which we've been doing for a while for the most part. So again, every number from the first term needs to go to the second term. So I'm going to take my negative or my 2x and distribute it everywhere. I'm going to do the same thing with that minus, or the plus 3. We need to multiply it everywhere. So when we move our 2x, we would have 2x times x, and we would have 2x times negative 2. When we do our second set, we would have 3 times x and 3 times negative 2. And now we can simplify. This is x to the first and x to the first. So this would become 2x squared because that's 1 plus 1. 2x times negative x is going to give us negative 4x. That'll just become 3x and negative 6. Is there anything else that we can combine together? There is. We can put our 4x and our 3x. So minus 4x plus 3x. That's the same thing as saying negative 4 plus 3 and tacking our x at the end, which means we would have negative 1x or negative x. So our final answer would be 2x squared minus x minus 6. Let's go and do one more. Again, we need to distribute the first term everywhere to the second term, or to the second set, and the second term, first set as well. So in red, we're going to do x squared. X squared times x and x squared times negative 3x. We're just going to put a plus sign in the center because we're going to add them together. And we're doing 1 times x plus 1 times negative 3x. I'm going to start at the second one first because anything times 1 is just going to give me itself. So 1 times x is just going to give us x. 1 times negative 3x will just give us negative 3x. So that part's easy to solve. Let's go to the slightly more difficult one. X squared in x to the first is going to give us x to the third. X squared and negative 3x. Remember, there's a 1 out front. So 1 times negative 3 is going to give us negative 3. And x squared plus 1x is going to give us x to the third. Now we can combine our x to the thirds, and we would have 1 minus 3 x to the third, which is going to give us negative 2x to the third. All of this just keeps carrying down. So plus x minus 3x, actually, we can combine those. So what is 1 minus 3x? That'll give us minus 2x. So that would be our answer. And the last one I believe that we're going to do today is a binomial times a trinomial. 2 terms times 3 terms. When we do 2 terms times 3 terms, it's basically the same idea. We distribute that first term from the first group to every single number in the second group. When we do that, we would end up with x times 3x plus x times negative 4y plus x times 5. Now we need to do the same thing on the back, so we would distribute that 2y everywhere. Meaning we're going to have 2y times 3x. Then we're going to have 2y times negative 4y. And the last one will be 2y times 5. And again, we're going to simplify. So since there's a 1 there, 1 times 3 gives us 3. And x to the first times x to the first would be x to the 1 plus 1, which is 2. For the second set, for the second term that we're trying to find, there is nothing we can combine, so we'll just kind of smush everything together and get negative 4xy. And we can do the same thing for the third term. Everything just gets smushed together and we just get 5x. Over here, we would have 2 times 3 times x times y. And 2 times 3 becomes 6. We can't do anything with xy, so it stays the same. Over here, we would have 2 times negative 4 and y times y. 2 times negative 4 would give us that negative 8. And y times y becomes y squared. On the last one, we would have 2 times 5y, which gives us 10y. Now we need to figure out, is there anything to simplify? And there are a few things. First thing I'm going to look for is my x squared. Any other x squared? There is not. So let's go ahead, drop it down. And then I'm also going to cross it out so I don't forget that I already did it. We can put our xy's together. So what is 4 and 6? Negative 4 plus 6xy. That would give us positive 2xy. And again, I'm going to cross them out so I remember we did it. And there's nothing else to combine. So we would just copy everything else down. Plus 5x minus 8y squared plus 10y. So now that I've written them all down, we need to just now put them in sequential order. So we would do 3x squared. Then we would take our y squared, so minus 8y squared. Then we do our xy. And then we'll do our x. And then we'll do our y. Even though technically they are the same equation, one is just slightly more correct than the other. And that is multiplying polynomials.